I found the letter wedged into my screen door on a Tuesday morning in late March, the kind of dry, bright day that makes Albuquerque's North Valley shimmer with new cottonwood leaves. The envelope bore the return address of the Arroyo Vista Homeowners Association, and inside was a printed notice informing me that I had violated Section 7.3b of the community bylaws by erecting a fence on common property. The fine was $800, payable within 14 days, with an additional $50 per day if I failed to comply. I read it twice standing on my front step, the paper crackling in my hands. The fence in question was a 60-foot cedar privacy screen I had spent 3 weekends building along the western edge of my backyard. Every board, every post, every inch of hardware had come from my own pocket. More importantly, every inch of ground it occupied belonged to me. I had the survey, the permits, the receipts, and the photographs to prove it. My name is Grant Walker, and I am not the kind of man who builds things without checking first. I work as a civil engineer for the city, reviewing drainage plans and infrastructure projects, which means I understand exactly how property lines, easements, and setbacks function. When I bought this house 2 years ago, a modest territorial-style adobe with thick walls and old vigas, I knew the lot extended 20 feet farther west than the previous owner had used. The survey I commissioned before closing showed it clearly. 6 months ago, when I finally decided to fence in that space for a vegetable garden, I pulled permits from the county, marked every corner with stakes, and built everything to code. Now someone at the HOA was claiming I had encroached on their land. I walked back inside and spread the letter on my kitchen table next to my morning coffee, which had gone cold. The signature at the bottom belonged to Sharon Pemberton, HOA president. I did not know Sharon Pemberton personally, but I had seen her at community meetings, a woman in her mid-50s with blonde highlights and a tendency to interrupt people mid-sentence. She lived 4 houses down in a house with an elaborate xeriscape and a mailbox shaped like a chili pepper. The letter referenced a plat map on file with the association that supposedly showed the western boundary of my lot stopping 10 feet short of where my fence now stood. I had never seen this plat. The one I had used, certified by the county and prepared by a licensed surveyor, told a very different story. I pulled out my file cabinet and retrieved the folder labeled Property Documents. Inside was everything I had accumulated over 2 years of ownership. The title report, the closing statement, the survey drawing on heavy paper with the surveyor's stamp embossed in blue ink, and the building permits I had obtained for the fence. I laid them out in a row and studied them again, looking for any error I might have made. There was none. My western property line ran along an old irrigation ditch that dated back to the Spanish colonial period, a feature clearly marked on both the county assessor's map and my survey. The fence sat 15 feet inside that line, leaving a generous margin. I called the phone number printed at the top of the HOA letter. It rang 4 times before a woman answered with a clipped, "Arroyo Vista HOA, Sharon speaking." "This is Grant Walker on Guadalupe Trail," I said. "I received a letter today about a fence violation." "Yes, Mr. Walker." Her voice had the tone of someone who had already made up her mind. "We conducted an inspection last week and determined that your fence extends onto common property. The association owns a 10-foot easement along the western perimeter of your lot for maintenance access to the irrigation ditch. Your structure violates that easement." "I have a survey that shows otherwise," I said. "My lot line runs to the center of the ditch." "There is no easement on my survey or in my title report. Our records show differently," Sharon said. The plat map filed with the association clearly delineates the easement. It was established when this subdivision was created in 1998. I bought the house in 2023. The subdivision was now 27 years old, built on farmland that had once grown alfalfa and chili. Many of the original plats from that era contained errors, I knew, because I had reviewed plenty of them in my job. Developers sometimes filed preliminary maps that were later revised, and not every revision made it into every file. "I would like to see that plat," I said. "You can request a copy at the next board meeting," Sharon said. "In the meantime, the fine stands. If you wish to dispute it, you will need to submit a written appeal within 10 days. And if I prove the fence is on my property, then the board will review your evidence." Her tone suggested she did not expect my evidence to matter. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table and ate a late breakfast of eggs and toast while I thought through my next steps. I needed a current survey, something recent enough that the HOA could not claim my 2-year-old drawing was outdated. I also needed to document the irrigation ditch and its legal status, which might require digging into county records and old maps. The problem was that surveyors were expensive and booked weeks in advance. I had used the last of my savings on the fence materials. Hiring another surveyor to re-establish something I had already proven once felt like paying twice for the same truth. I was still thinking about this when I heard voices in the yard next door. My neighbor, a woman named Beatrice Sullivan, was outside with her son, a boy of about 8 who often played in the dirt along the property line. I had spoken to Beatrice a handful of times since she moved in last fall, mostly brief exchanges about garbage pickup schedules and the weather. She worked irregular hours and kept to herself, which I respected. Her son, whose name I thought was Thomas or Theo, was more outgoing. He liked to watch me work on projects and ask questions about tools. I stepped outside and saw them inspecting the fence. Beatrice was running her hand along one of the cedar posts, checking the joints. She wore jeans and a faded denim jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. When she saw me, she straightened. "Hope you do not mind," she said. "Theo wanted to see how you attach the pickets. He has been talking about it all week." "I do not mind," I said. I walked over and leaned against the fence. "Did you get a letter from the HOA?" She shook her head. "About what?" "They claim my fence is on common property. They are fining me $800. Beatrice frowned. "That does not make sense. You are at least 10 feet inside the ditch line." "You can tell that just by looking. I am a land surveyor," she said. "I notice these things." I stared at her for a moment, processing this information. Then I laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Do you do private work?" "Sometimes," she said. "Why?" I explained the situation. The letter, the fine, the supposed easement that did not appear on any of my documents. Beatrice listened with her arms crossed, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she glanced back at the fence and then at the ditch beyond it. "I can run a resurvey," she said. "It will take a few hours, but I can fit it in this weekend. I charge $800 for a standard residential lot, but given the circumstances, I will do it for $4. You do not have to discount it." "I want to," she said. "If the HOA is wrong, they should not be allowed to bully you into paying for their mistake." I agreed to her terms and we shook hands. Theo watched this exchange with wide eyes, then asked if he could help with the survey. Beatrice told him maybe, if he behaved himself between now and Saturday. That evening I started gathering every document I could find related to the property. I pulled the original subdivision plat from the county website, a scanned image from 1998 that showed the layout of all 64 lots in Arroyo Vista. I also found the deed restrictions filed with the development, which included language about common areas and maintenance responsibilities. None of it mentioned a 10-foot easement along the western lots. The irrigation ditch was labeled as a boundary feature, not an HOA asset. I printed everything and added it to my folder. Then I drafted a formal appeal letter to the board, outlining my position and requesting a copy of the plat Sharon Pemberton had referenced. I kept the language polite but firm. I did not want to start a war, but I also would not pay a fine for something I had not done wrong. By the time I finished, it was past 10, and my house was dark except for the light over the kitchen table. I could hear the wind picking up outside, rattling the screen door. I thought about Beatrice next door, about the fact that I had lived beside her for 6 months without knowing her profession. I wondered what else I did not know about the people around me, how much I had kept my life closed off since moving here. I had bought this house because I wanted space, both literal and figurative. After my father died, I left my job in Santa Fe and came to Albuquerque for a fresh start. The North Valley suited me. It was quiet, semi-rural, full of old families and long histories. I could work on projects in my yard without neighbors asking questions, could go days without talking to anyone outside of work. It was not loneliness exactly. It was more like a deliberate simplicity, a life stripped down to what I could see and measure and build with my own hands. Now someone was challenging the one thing I had built with the most care, and I realized how much it mattered to me. Not just the fence itself, but the principle behind it. I had done everything right, followed every rule, checked every detail. If that was not enough, then nothing was. On Wednesday, I submitted my appeal letter to the HOA by certified mail. On Thursday, I received a reply from Sharon Pemberton acknowledging receipt and informing me that the board would review my case at their next meeting on April 15th, 3 weeks away. In the meantime, the fine remained in effect, and the daily penalties would begin accruing if I did not pay by the original deadline. I called a lawyer I knew from work, a guy named Ed Castillo who handled property disputes. He listened to my story and then gave me his assessment. "You are in the right," he said, "but HOAs have a lot of leeway under New Mexico law. If they believe in good faith that you violated their rules, they can fine you, and you will have to go through their internal process before you can challenge them in court. Even if you win, it could take months. What if I just ignore the fine? They can put a lien on your house," Ed said. "Eventually they could even foreclose, though that is rare. Mostly they will make your life difficult. My advice is to go to the hearing with all your documents and stay calm. If the board is reasonable, they will reverse the fine. If not, we can escalate." I thanked him and hung up. Reasonable. I was not sure Sharon Pemberton knew the meaning of the word. Saturday morning arrived cool and bright, the sky a pale, washed-out blue. Beatrice showed up at 9 with Theo and a truck full of equipment. A theodolite, a GPS unit, a metal detector, and a stack of wooden stakes. She wore a canvas vest with a dozen pockets and a ball cap with the logo of her surveying company, Sullivan Land Services. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." We started at the front corner of my lot, where the original survey marker was buried under a layer of gravel. Beatrice used the metal detector to locate it, then had Theo help dig it out. It was a piece of rebar with a plastic cap stamped with the surveyor's license number. She recorded the position with her GPS unit, taking several readings to ensure accuracy. "This is the fun part," she told Theo. "Every measurement builds on the last one. If you get the first point wrong, everything else is off." Theo nodded seriously, holding the detector like it was a treasure map. We worked our way around the property, checking each corner against the original survey. Beatrice moved with practiced efficiency, setting up the theodolite and sighting down the property lines, making notes in a weathered field book. I followed behind, answering questions and carrying equipment. It felt good to be doing something productive, something that would generate proof I could hold in my hands. By noon, we had completed 3 sides of the lot. The western boundary was last, the one in dispute. We walked out to the irrigation ditch, which ran in a shallow depression lined with rabbit brush and salt cedar. The ditch had not carried water in decades, but its course was still visible, a deliberate cut through the landscape. Beatrice set up the theodolite on the back corner of my lot and took a series of measurements. Then she walked the line with a measuring tape, marking intervals with stakes. I watched from the fence, which stood a full 15 feet from the ditch center line. After 30 minutes, Beatrice returned and began packing up her equipment. "Well," I asked, "your fence is not even close to the property line," she said. "You have got 15 feet to spare, just like the original survey shows. If there is an easement out here, it is not on your land." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Can you put that in a report?" "I will have it ready by Tuesday," she said. "I will include photos, coordinates, and a comparison with the original survey. If the HOA has a different plat, they are going to need to explain where it came from." We loaded her equipment back into the truck. Theo was dirty and happy, his hands stained with rust from the rebar caps. He asked if he could come back next time I built something, and I told him sure, if his mother said it was okay. Beatrice paused before getting in the truck. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you build the fence? You have got all this open space back here. Most people would leave it." I thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated, bound up with my father and the way he had taught me to work with my hands, the way he had insisted that a man should know the boundaries of what he owned and take care of it properly. "I wanted a garden," I said, "and I wanted some privacy. The fence made sense." She nodded, like that was enough of an answer. Then she and Theo drove away, leaving me standing in my yard with the stakes she had placed along the property line, small bright flags fluttering in the wind. I spent the rest of the weekend working in the garden plot I had created behind the fence. I turned the soil, mixed in compost, and planted seeds for tomatoes, squash, and beans. The work kept my hands busy and my mind off the HOA. By Sunday evening I was sore and sunburned, but the garden looked like it might actually produce something by summer. On Monday I went back to work at the city engineering office, where I spent 8 hours reviewing a stormwater plan for a new retail development on the west side. My boss, a man named Ray Trujillo, stopped by my desk in the afternoon and asked how my weekend had been. "I hired a surveyor to prove my fence is legal," I said. Ray laughed. "HOA giving you trouble, $800 fine." "They are all the same," Ray said. "Bunch of people with too much time and not enough to do. Good luck with it." I appreciated the sympathy, though it did not solve my problem. I worked late that night, catching up on projects I had let slide while dealing with the fence issue. By the time I got home, it was dark, and the neighborhood was quiet except for dogs barking in the distance. I found a casserole dish on my front step covered in foil. A note taped to the top read, "Thanks for letting Theo help. Enchiladas. Heat at 350 for 20 minutes. Beatrice." I brought the dish inside and heated it as instructed. The enchiladas were chicken and green chili, smothered in cheese and baked until the edges were crispy. I ate half the pan standing at the counter, surprised by how good it tasted, how much I had missed home-cooked food that someone else had made. I had been living on sandwiches and canned soup for most of the past 2 years. After I finished, I washed the dish and walked next door to return it. Beatrice answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You did not have to bring that back tonight," she said. "I wanted to thank you," I said, "for the food and for the survey. Both helped." She leaned against the doorframe, looking tired but pleased. "I will have the report finished tomorrow. I will email you a copy and I can print one for the HOA if you want." "That would be great." "Do you want to come in?" she asked. "I just made coffee." I hesitated, then nodded. Her house was smaller than mine, a two-bedroom with low ceilings and saltillo tile floors. The living room was cluttered with Theo's toys and schoolwork, but it felt lived in and warm. We sat at her kitchen table, and she poured 2 mugs of coffee. "Theo really enjoyed helping on Saturday," she said. "He does not have a lot of male figures in his life. His father is not around." "I do not mind him hanging around," I said. "He is a good kid." "He is," she said. "He just needs things to do. He gets bored easily." We talked for a while about small things: work, the neighborhood, the difficulty of finding decent green chili in grocery stores. It was easy conversation, the kind that fills space without demanding much. When I finally left, it was past 10, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not quite happiness, but a loosening, a sense that my life might be slightly less solitary than I had made it. On Tuesday, Beatrice emailed me the survey report. It was 12 pages long, including photographs, legal descriptions, and a comparison chart showing the measurements from both surveys. Her conclusion was unambiguous. My fence was located entirely within my property boundaries, with no encroachment onto any common area or easement. She also noted that the irrigation ditch itself was a private water conveyance system predating the subdivision, maintained by the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, and was not owned or controlled by the HOA. I printed 3 copies of the report and added one to my file. The other 2 I planned to bring to the board meeting. Over the next 2 weeks, I heard nothing from the HOA. The deadline for my fine came and went, and I did not pay. I expected a follow-up letter threatening additional penalties, but none arrived. The silence made me uneasy, like the quiet before a storm. Meanwhile, Theo started showing up at my house after school. The first time, he knocked on my door and asked if I needed help with anything. I was replacing a broken sprinkler head, so I handed him a wrench and let him hold the pipe steady while I worked. After that, he came by 2 or 3 times a week. We did not talk much, but the company was pleasant. He reminded me of myself at that age, curious about how things worked, happy to be useful. Beatrice usually came by to collect him around dinner time. A few times she stayed, and we ate together, simple meals I threw together from whatever was in the fridge. She was easy to be around, not demanding or intrusive. She had her own life and her own work, and she did not expect me to fill any role except the one I was already playing. It was a kind of relationship I had not experienced before, built on small, practical exchanges rather than grand gestures. One evening in early April, she asked me why I had moved to Albuquerque. We were sitting on my back porch, watching Theo chase lizards along the fence line. The sun was setting behind the cottonwoods, turning the sky orange and pink. "I needed a change," I said. "From what?" "Santa Fe." "My old job. My father died, and I did not want to stay in the house we had shared." She nodded, not pushing for more. After a moment, she said, "I moved here after my divorce. I wanted Theo to grow up somewhere with space where he could play outside and not be stuck in an apartment." "Is his father still in the picture?" "No," she said. "He left when Theo was 2. We have not heard from him in 6 years." "I am sorry." "Do not be," she said. "We are better off. It is just the 2 of us, and that is fine." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. We sat in silence, watching the light fade, until Beatrice called Theo inside and they went home. The board meeting was held in the community center on the evening of April 15th, a low adobe building with a tile roof and a courtyard full of rose bushes. I arrived 15 minutes early with my folder of documents and the 2 printed copies of Beatrice's survey report. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs for residents. About 20 people were already seated, most of them older homeowners I recognized from neighborhood events. Sharon Pemberton sat at the center of the table, flanked by 4 other board members. She was wearing a blazer and a string of turquoise beads, her expression businesslike. When she saw me, she nodded curtly but did not smile. The meeting started with routine business: approval of the previous minutes, a treasurer's report, updates on landscaping contracts. I sat in the back and waited. My case was listed as item 6 on the agenda, under violations and appeals. When Sharon finally called my name, I stood and walked to the front. She gestured to a chair facing the board. "Mr. Walker, you submitted an appeal regarding the fine issued for your fence," Sharon said. "The board has reviewed your letter. Would you like to present your case?" "Yes," I said. I opened my folder and handed each board member a copy of Beatrice's survey report. "This is a current survey of my property, conducted 2 weeks ago by a licensed surveyor. As you can see, my fence is located entirely within my lot boundaries, 15 feet from the western property line. There is no encroachment on any common area or easement." Sharon flipped through the report, her lips pressed into a thin line. The other board members did the same. One of them, an older man with silver hair, looked up and said, "This contradicts the plat map we have on file." "I would like to see that map," I said. Sharon pulled a rolled sheet of paper from a briefcase beside her chair and spread it on the table. It was a plat map dated 1998, the same one I had downloaded from the county website. But this version had been annotated by hand with a red marker. Along the western edge of my lot and several others, someone had drawn a dashed line 10 feet inside the boundary, labeled HOA Maintenance Easement. I leaned forward to study it. The handwriting was neat but faded, like it had been added years ago. I noticed that the annotation did not appear on the original county plat, which I also had in my folder. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "It was filed with the HOA at the time of development," Sharon said. "The easement was established to allow access for ditch maintenance." "But it does not appear on the county plat," I said, "or on my title report, or on the survey I had done when I bought the house. If this easement existed, it would have been recorded in the county records and disclosed at closing." The older man with silver hair frowned. "Sharon, do we have documentation showing when this easement was created?" Sharon hesitated. "It has always been part of our records." "But is it legally recorded?" he pressed. "I assume so." "That is not an answer." I pulled out the original county plat and laid it next to the HOA version. "This is the official plat on file with Bernalillo County. As you can see, there is no easement marked. The irrigation ditch is labeled as a boundary feature, not an HOA asset. According to the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, the ditch is maintained by the district, not by the HOA." Sharon's face flushed. "The HOA has always maintained that easement." "Then you should have a deed or a recorded agreement proving it," I said. "Do you?" She did not answer. The other board members exchanged glances. One of them, a woman in her 60s with gray curls, said, "Sharon, I think we need to table this and do some research. If the easement was never recorded, we may not have a legal basis for the fine." "The map has been in our files for 27 years, Sharon said. "That is proof enough." "No," the older man said. "It is not. This is a serious issue and we need to handle it correctly. I move that we rescind the fine pending verification of the easement." "I second," said the woman with gray curls. Sharon looked furious, but she called for a vote. 4 of the 5 board members voted to rescind the fine. Sharon abstained. I gathered my documents and left the meeting feeling both vindicated and unsettled. I had won this round, but the underlying question remained. Where had that annotation come from, and why had the HOA been operating under the assumption that it was valid? Over the next week, I decided to dig deeper. I started by visiting the county clerk's office, where property records were kept. I requested copies of every document related to the Arroyo Vista subdivision, including the original plat, the deed restrictions, and any easements or encumbrances recorded against the lots. The clerk, a patient woman named Gloria, helped me search the database. We found the original plat, the deed restrictions, and the subdivision approval from 1998. We found easements for utilities and drainage, but we found no recorded easement for HOA maintenance along the western lots. "If it was not recorded, it does not exist," Gloria said. "At least not in a way that would be enforceable against a property owner." "Could someone have filed a map with the HOA that was not filed with the county?" "Sure," she said, "but it would not have any legal effect. The official record is what matters." I thanked her and left with a stack of photocopies. Back at home, I spread them out on my kitchen table and studied them again. Something about the annotated map bothered me. The handwriting, the faded ink, the fact that no one seemed to know where it had come from. I called Beatrice and asked if she would take a look. She came over that evening after Theo was in bed, carrying a magnifying glass and a small ruler. "What am I looking for?" she asked. "Anything that seems off?" She examined the annotated plat under the magnifying glass, measuring the lines and studying the handwriting. After 10 minutes, she sat back. "This was not done by a surveyor," she said. "The dashed line is not straight and the measurements do not match the scale of the map. It looks like someone drew this in freehand, probably years after the original plat was created." "Could it have been the developer?" "Maybe," she said. "But if the developer wanted an easement, they would have recorded it properly. This looks more like someone made a mistake and tried to formalize it later by drawing it on a map. Or someone wanted to expand the HOA's authority," I said. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "You think Sharon did this?" "I do not know, but I want to find out." The next day, I requested copies of the HOA's board meeting minutes going back to 1998. Under New Mexico law, HOAs are required to keep minutes and make them available to homeowners. I sent the request in writing, citing the relevant statute, and waited. 2 weeks later, I received a box of photocopied minutes, several hundred pages spanning 27 years. I spent an entire weekend reading through them, looking for any mention of the easement or the annotated plat. I found it in the minutes from a meeting in July 2001. The board at that time had been discussing maintenance responsibilities for the irrigation ditch, which ran along the western edge of the subdivision. Several homeowners had complained about overgrown vegetation, and the board debated whether the HOA should take responsibility for clearing it. According to the minutes, one board member, a man named Rick Hoffman, had suggested establishing an easement along the ditch to give the HOA legal access for maintenance. Another member, whose name was redacted, had argued that the HOA did not own the ditch and therefore could not create an easement. The discussion had ended without a resolution, and the minutes noted that Rick Hoffman would research options and report back. There was no follow-up in subsequent meetings, but 6 months later, the minutes referenced a revised plat map that had been filed with the HOA's records. No details were given about what the revisions were or who had made them. I sat back and rubbed my eyes. It was nearly midnight, and my kitchen was littered with papers. The picture that was emerging was not one of deliberate fraud, but of careless bureaucracy. Someone, probably Rick Hoffman, had drawn an easement on a plat map without understanding that it had no legal effect unless it was recorded with the county. Over the years, that annotated map had become part of the HOA's internal records, and successive boards had assumed it was legitimate. The problem was that assumptions, no matter how long held, did not create property rights. I decided to write a detailed summary of my findings and present it to the board at their next meeting. I wanted this resolved not just for myself, but for every homeowner along the western edge of the subdivision. If the HOA was operating under a false understanding of their authority, it needed to be corrected. But before I could do that, I received a phone call from Sharon Pemberton. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice tight, "I need to speak with you about your continued harassment of the board." I blinked. "Excuse me. Your repeated requests for documents, your accusations at the meeting, your attempt to undermine the authority of this board. It is harassment and it needs to stop." "I have not harassed anyone," I said. "I requested documents that I am legally entitled to see, and I presented evidence that your fine was based on an error. If you consider that harassment, you do not understand the law." "I understand perfectly," Sharon said. "And I am telling you that if you continue down this path, the board will take action." "What kind of action?" "We will file a complaint with the county. We will pursue legal remedies. We will do whatever is necessary to protect the interests of this community." I felt my anger rising but kept my voice calm. "Sharon, I am not your enemy. I am trying to help you fix a mistake. If the easement was never recorded, the HOA has been operating under a false assumption for 20 years. That is a liability not just for me, but for the association. You should be thanking me for bringing it to your attention." "I do not need your help," she said, "and I do not appreciate your tone. This conversation is over." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, my jaw clenched. I had dealt with difficult people in my work, bureaucrats and contractors who resisted admitting mistakes, but Sharon Pemberton was in a category of her own. She was not interested in the truth. She was interested in being right. That night, Beatrice came over with a 6-pack of beer and a sympathetic ear. I told her about the phone call, and she shook her head. "She is scared," Beatrice said. "If the easement is not real, it means the board has been collecting fees and issuing fines based on a lie. That is a lawsuit waiting to happen." "I do not want to sue anyone," I said. "I just want them to admit they were wrong. Then you are a better person than most." We sat on my back porch, drinking beer and watching the stars come out. Theo was inside watching a movie, his laughter drifting through the open window. It felt peaceful despite everything. "Can I ask you something?" Beatrice said. "Sure." "Why does this matter so much to you? You won your appeal. The fine is gone. You could just walk away." I thought about it for a long time before answering. "My father taught me that if you are going to do something, you do it right. You measure twice, you check your work, you do not cut corners. I built that fence the right way, and I do not want anyone saying otherwise. It is not about the money. It is about knowing I did what I was supposed to do." Beatrice nodded. "Your father sounds like a good man." He was. We did not talk much after that, but the silence was comfortable. By the time Beatrice and Theo left, it was late, and I felt less alone than I had in years. The next board meeting was scheduled for May 20th. I prepared a presentation outlining my research. The missing recorded easement, the annotated plat map, the minutes from 2001 showing the discussion about maintenance responsibilities. I also included a recommendation that the board conduct a full review of their property records and correct any errors before someone else got fined for a violation that did not exist. On the night of the meeting, I arrived early and set up a small projector I had borrowed from work. About 30 residents showed up, more than usual, including several homeowners from the western lots who had heard about my case. Beatrice came too, sitting in the back with Theo, who was drawing on a notepad. When Sharon called the meeting to order, she looked annoyed to see the projector. "Mr. Walker, this is not a formal presentation," she said. "If you have something to say, you can address the board during public comment." "I have documents to share," I said. "It will be easier if everyone can see them." Sharon sighed but did not object. I connected my laptop and pulled up the first slide, a side-by-side comparison of the county plat and the annotated HOA version. "As you can see," I began, "the easement marked on the HOA map does not appear on the official county plat. I checked with the county clerk, and there is no recorded easement along the western lots. That means the easement does not legally exist." I clicked to the next slide, showing the minutes from 2001. According to the board's own records, the idea of an easement was discussed, but never formally adopted. Someone drew the easement on a map, but it was never filed with the county, which is required for it to be enforceable. Murmurs spread through the room. Several homeowners were taking notes. Sharon's face was red, and she looked like she wanted to interrupt, but the older man with silver hair, whose name I had learned was Martin Delgado, held up a hand. "Let him finish," Martin said. I went through the rest of my findings, explaining the legal requirements for creating an easement and the implications of operating under a false assumption. When I finished, I turned off the projector and faced the board. "I am not here to attack anyone," I said, "but this is a serious issue. If the HOA continues to enforce rules based on an easement that does not exist, you are opening yourselves up to legal liability. I am asking the board to acknowledge the error, update your records, and ensure this does not happen to anyone else." Martin Delgado nodded. "Mr. Walker, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think it is clear that we need to conduct an audit of our property records and consult with an attorney. Sharon, do you agree?" Sharon looked like she had swallowed something bitter. "Fine," she said. "We will look into it." "I also move that we issue a formal apology to Mr. Walker for the incorrect fine," Martin said. "I second," said the woman with gray curls. The motion passed 4-1, with Sharon voting against. She announced the decision in a flat voice, then moved on to the next item on the agenda. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to thank me. One man, who lived 3 houses down from me, said he had been planning to build a shed along the western edge of his lot and was relieved to know he would not face the same hassle I had. Beatrice and Theo met me outside. Theo high-fived me and Beatrice said, "You did good." "Thanks for coming," I said. "Would not have missed it." We walked back to our houses together, the night air cool and full of the smell of lilacs. Theo ran ahead, chasing moths under the streetlights. When we reached Beatrice's driveway, she turned to me. "You want to have dinner this weekend?" she asked. "Actual dinner, not just leftovers. I will cook something nice." "I would like that," I said. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and I felt something shift in my chest. It was not a dramatic moment, not a sudden realization. It was quieter than that, like a door opening slowly to let light into a room that had been dark for a long time. The rest of May passed in a blur of warm evenings and easy routines. I worked in my garden, planting peppers and herbs, and Theo helped me build a raised bed for strawberries. Beatrice came over most nights and we cooked together, experimenting with recipes and talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her work, the satisfaction of finding old survey markers and resolving boundary disputes. I told her about the projects I was working on at the city, the way infrastructure shaped people's lives in ways they never noticed. It was not a romance out of a movie. There were no grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but there was something steady and real building between us, a foundation I had not known I needed. In early June, the HOA hired an attorney to review their property records. The attorney confirmed what I had already discovered. The easement was not legally valid, and the board had been operating under a mistaken assumption for more than 2 decades. The attorney also advised the board to issue a public notice correcting the error, and to reimburse any homeowner who had been fined for violations related to the easement. Sharon Pemberton resigned from the board 2 weeks later. The official reason given was personal commitments, but everyone knew she had been forced out. Martin Delgado was elected president in her place, and at his first meeting, he issued a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA. The apology was entered into the minutes and posted on the community website. I accepted the apology and moved on. The whole ordeal had taken 3 months, but it was finally over. My fence stood exactly where I had built it, 15 feet inside my property line, a testament to the importance of doing things right. That summer was one of the best I could remember. My garden flourished, producing tomatoes, squash, beans, and more peppers than I knew what to do with. I gave bags of vegetables to Beatrice and other neighbors, and in return, people started stopping by to chat, asking for advice on their own projects. The neighborhood felt less like a collection of separate houses and more like a community. Beatrice and I grew closer. We spent weekends exploring the Sandia Mountains with Theo, hiking trails and picnicking by streams. She taught me how to read topographic maps, and I taught Theo how to use a level and a tape measure. It was a strange, unexpected family we were building, but it felt right. One evening in late July, as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset, Beatrice said, "I have been thinking about something." "What?" "Theo needs stability. I need stability. We both like being around you. What if we made this more permanent?" I looked at her surprised. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet," she said, laughing. "I am asking if you have thought about it, about us, about where this is going." I had thought about it, though I had not put words to it. The truth was, I could not imagine going back to the way things had been before Beatrice and Theo came into my life. The solitude I had once craved now felt like an absence, a gap that needed filling. "I have thought about it," I said. "And I want this. I want you. I want Theo. I want all of it." She leaned over and kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted like summer and promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Good," she said, "because Theo already told everyone at school that you are his stepdad." I laughed, surprised and touched. "Does he?" "He does. He is proud of you." "So am I." We got engaged in September, a quiet proposal on a weekend trip to Taos. No ring, no fanfare, just a conversation on a hotel balcony overlooking the Rio Grande. We decided to wait a year before getting married, to give Theo time to adjust and to make sure we were building something that would last. Over the next year, we merged our lives slowly and carefully. Beatrice and Theo moved into my house in December, and we spent the winter making it ours. We painted the bedrooms, hung new curtains, and built shelves for Theo's growing collection of rocks and tools. Beatrice set up an office in the spare room for her surveying business, and I cleared space in the garage for her equipment. We got married in October, a small ceremony in my backyard with about 30 people. Friends from work, neighbors, Beatrice's family from Las Cruces. Martin Delgado came, and so did Ed Castillo, the lawyer who had advised me during the HOA dispute. The ceremony was simple, officiated by a judge Beatrice knew, and afterward we served green chili stew and wedding cake under a tent. Theo stood beside me during the vows, holding the rings on a small pillow. When the judge pronounced us married, he cheered louder than anyone. Life settled into a rhythm after that. We worked, we cooked, we took care of the house and the garden. Beatrice's business grew, and she hired an assistant to help with field work. I got a promotion at the city, overseeing a team of engineers working on flood control projects. Theo thrived in school, making friends and joining a robotics club. We talked about having more kids, and after some discussion, we decided to try. Beatrice got pregnant in the spring, and our daughter was born the following January. We named her Marisol, after Beatrice's grandmother. She was a calm, watchful baby, with dark eyes and a serious expression that made us laugh. 2 years later, our son Theo was born, named after Theo, who by then was insisting everyone call him by his full name, Theodore. Theo was the opposite of his sister, loud and energetic from the moment he entered the world. Together, they filled the house with noise and joy, transforming it from a quiet refuge into something messier and more alive. Theo, now a teenager, took his role as big brother seriously. He helped with diaper changes and bedtime stories, and he taught Marisol and Theo how to use tools as soon as they were old enough to hold them. Watching him with them, I saw echoes of my own father, the way he had taught me patience and precision, the value of doing things right. The fence, the cause of so much trouble, became part of the landscape. Vines grew along it, and birds nested in the cedar posts. The garden behind it produced food every summer, and the kids played there, chasing each other through the rows of tomatoes and peppers. In the years that followed, the HOA under Martin Delgado's leadership became more transparent and responsive. They updated their records, corrected errors, and stopped enforcing rules that had no legal basis. The community became a better place to live, not because of grand changes, but because people started paying attention to the details. I never forgot the lesson of the fence. It taught me that truth, when backed by evidence and persistence, could prevail against even the most entrenched assumptions. It also taught me that opening my life to other people, letting them in past the boundaries I had built, was not a loss of control but an expansion of possibility. One Saturday afternoon in early summer, years after the whole ordeal began, Beatrice and I sat on the back porch watching Marisol and Theo chase each other along the fence line. Marisol was 8 now, quick and clever, and Theo was 6, all energy and laughter. Theodore, now 17 and preparing for college, was inside working on a project for his engineering class. "You ever think about that first letter?" Beatrice asked. "The fine from the HOA." "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly I think about how lucky I was that you lived next door." She laughed. "Lucky I am a surveyor, you mean?" "Lucky you are you," I said. She reached over and took my hand, and we sat there in the fading light, listening to our kids play and the wind move through the cottonwoods. The fence stood solid and straight, exactly where I had built it, a reminder that some things, when done right, lasted. Years later, when people asked me about the fence, I told them the whole story. The fine, the survey, the annotated plat, the months of research, and the board meeting where the truth finally came out. But what I remembered most was not the conflict or the vindication. It was the way Beatrice had shown up with her equipment and her expertise, the way Theo had held the metal detector like it mattered, the way a dispute over property lines had opened my life to a family I had not known I was looking for. I had bought the land, built the fence, and owned every inch of it. But what I built with Beatrice and the kids, The life we made together in that house with its thick adobe walls and old vigas was something no survey could measure and no HOA could take away. It was ours, solid and real, built on a foundation of trust and care and the stubborn insistence that the truth, when you could prove it, was worth fighting for. And every time I looked at that fence, standing exactly where it belonged, I remembered that some battles were worth winning not because of what you gained, but because of what you proved. That you had done things right, that you had checked your work, that you had measured twice and built something that would last.